Scott Lauber covers the Phillies, Philly.com, as the Phillies figured out a way to lose last night in Game 2 against the Nationals, and you could surmise with 18 games left in the season and being this deep back in the standings. I think it's, you can see what happened to the Braves played late last night, right, against the Giants?
Yeah, they played at the Giants. Not sure on the final score to find it.
6.5 back. So, yeah, Braves won again last night. So, 6.5 back, 18 to play, 7 of the 18 against Atlanta. But, Scott, realistically, that game last night kind of tells the tale of August and September of where this Philadelphia Phillies team is right about now.
Yeah, yesterday had this feel to it between the day game and then what happened at night in the finale of the doubleheader. It just kind of had this sort of feel to it like, well, that's the end of that. And, look, we've seen crazier things happen, right? Like,
yeah,
11 years ago, the Phillies were 7.5 out with 17 to play and wound up winning the division. But, these Phillies, I don't think, are those Phillies. And, while the Braves could certainly do a Mets-like collapse from 2007, the way they're playing lately, I mean, they've had a very successful West Coast trip here. They seem to be sort of hitting their stride right at the right time. So they do have the 7 games left with the Braves, and certainly if they take care of business in those games, they can play their way back into this thing. But, yeah, a 6.5 game deficit, which is the largest of the season for the Phillies, with 18 to play, and given the fact that they are 11-22, I think now in their last 33 games, it just sort of has this feel to it like, this is not going to be their year. And, I wrote this morning. It kind of has the feel to me, and yesterday was maybe one of the first days I truly felt this way, that at the end of the day, maybe the Phillies are who we thought they were. Mm-hmm. When the season started, we kind of figured, look, a 500 season or slightly above, somewhere in the neighborhood of 82 to 85 wins, and probably not making the playoffs with that total. But that felt like a success at the beginning of the season. And obviously the way they played the first half, the bar was raised, and it's going to look like quite a disappointment if they end up now with somewhere in the neighborhood of 82 to 86 wins. But, ultimately that's sort of what you thought they might be when the season started, and I guess that's ultimately what they're going to end up being.
Now, Scott, I mean, I kind of agree with you, like that moment of, look, this team just simply isn't all that good. Now, they have exceeded expectations, but what have we learned about a team that has exceeded expectations, but I mean, at the end of the year, when you look back at this season, and let's say they're not going to make the playoffs, they might be right around 500. Heck, they might finish under 500 at this point, the way they're playing. What would you say that we have learned about this team that should make us excited about next year?
That's the big thing, I think, at this point, and that's where I think this year sort of falls down a little bit. I think you would have taken, 82 to 85 wins and missing the playoffs if you had gotten answers on players like J.P. Crawford and, Nick Williams and Maikel Franco even and Scott Kingery. And, if you'd gone through the year and you came to the end of the season and you were able to sort of say definitively, yes, that guy is part of the next contending Phillies team, or no, that guy is not. And I think they have as many or almost as many questions about almost as many players as they exit the season as they did when they entered. I mean, Crawford is kind of an extreme example because of injuries and whatnot. It was really truly a lost year for him, and you don't know whether he's the shortstop of the future or trade bait or something in between. And then there are guys who did play the whole year, and you just still have kind of this feeling of not really knowing whether they're truly in the plans or not. Like Nick Pivetta, right? I mean, Nick Pivetta has shown at times that he could be a very competent starter in the big leagues. There have been times, though, where he hasn't shown that. And overall, you just don't have an answer for whether, gun to your head, is Nick Pivetta in the rotation next year? You just don't know. And with the exception of Aaron Nola and Rhys Hoskins, and Jake Arrieta, and probably Jorge Alfaro, given the position that he plays and some of the potential that he's shown in certain areas. There aren't very many guys on the roster who, if you sort of said, all right, I need an answer right now, is that guy on the team next year and what's his role? There just aren't a whole lot of guys that you're that sure of.
Sure,
and that's really where this year I think kind of falls down a little bit.
Yeah, and a lot of that, I mean, look, I personally don't know what to think of Kapler. I don't know if I like him, if I don't like him, if he helps them, if he hurts them, if he holds them back. I think he's like a catch-22. I think sometimes he helps them because they're not that talented. I also think sometimes he hurts them because they're not that talented, and you have a 25-man roster, which a lot of these guys just aren't very good. And here's a guy who wants to utilize the whole roster. I'm like, well, your roster's not that good. You're utilizing too many guys. But so I think he's a plus. I think he's a minus. I don't know what to think. But you talk about development. Part of that frustrates me about the manager is I don't know what Pivetta is because he throws 4 innings a game. Same with Eflin. Same with Velasquez. I don't know what these guys are because the manager doesn't let me see them.
Right. Well, this is where contention almost has worked against them, especially in the past month or so. To me, I started getting to think about it the other day, and I was like, if you were going to win 85 games, you might as well, and miss the playoffs, you might as well have gone through an entire season like with Kingery at second and Crawford at short, and then you'd have answers. Or, go through the entire season with the rotation that you have and letting these guys go and letting them pitch. I don't necessarily think yanking Nick Pivetta early in a game in which you're losing, and we've seen him do this with other pitchers as well down the stretch, where they fall behind early, and then the pitcher spot in the lineup comes up in the 4th inning, and he's got to take him out because he needs runs. If you're in contention and you're trying to win a playoff spot, that's the way to do it.
Yeah,
especially in September where you've got 20 guys in your bullpen and you can bring in 4 guys in an inning, as we saw him do yesterday. If you're in contention, you kind of have to manage that way, but if you're not in contention, that's where you find out more about players that you still have lingering questions about. And so in a strange, crazy, bizarre way, being kind of on the fringes of playoff contention as they are now and have been for a little while, maybe has worked against them in terms of getting some answers to some of the development questions that they have about so many of their guys, whether it's Pivetta or Vince Velasquez or Zach Eflin, or on the position player side, a guy like Nick Williams, a guy like, Franco's been more of an everyday guy the second half of the season, but, guys who he's mixed and matched the lineup in order to find combinations that work, because at the moment he doesn't have 8 position players who are good enough to play every day. You're in a pennant race, and it's incumbent upon the manager to kind of find the combinations that have the best chance to work. But that doesn't mean you get any answers about some of the questions you have about young guys on your roster. So it's been this sort of push-pull now for the past month, like trying to balance contending with development, and they sort of wound up somewhere in between without really a whole lot of answers.
Hey, Scott, has Jake Arrieta been worth his contract this season? It's a debate and a conversation that Mike and I have had all summer long. I mean, he had a rough June, a great July, a 4.5 ERA in August, and now September through 2 starts, over 5 ERA, very up and down. How would you grade his performance, and has he lived up to the contract he received this offseason?
I'm someone who generally believes most free agents do not live, performance does not match up to the price tag on most free agents. I think that's sort of the nature of free agency. You're signing players at a point in their career where they are past their peak, but it is their peak earning potential of their careers. It's the thing about the baseball, the economic side of baseball that just doesn't line up. You when they're young and they're at their peak, they're generally a bargain. When they're free agents, they're past their peak and they don't. So, straight performance, no, he probably has not been worth the contract. But I also felt like in order to take the next step forward, they needed another pitcher. He was, I think, a good signing at the time. I think, I sort of felt like, look, Jake Arrieta was going to be a good signing for the Phillies if he did not wind up being their best pitcher, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. That if he could be their number 2 starter, which he certainly is, or even if someone really had taken a step forward, like Velasquez or Eflin or Pivetta, if Arrieta had wound up being their number 3 starter, yeah, he's getting paid a lot of money, but then you could sort of say, all right, well, you don't need him to be you don't need him to live up to the money per se. You're asking him to be there for his experience and his leadership, all of which I think have helped the Phillies this year. So, no, I don't think straight numbers and performance have lived up to the money, but I didn't expect it to. I just felt like, look, the cost of doing business in free agency is to sign a guy who, for more money than he's worth at this point in his career, who you need for various reasons. And they needed Arrieta. I thought Arrieta did a nice job for the balance of the season, giving them kind of what they needed from him. The fact that Aaron Nola has emerged as who he is, I think makes the Arrieta deal look actually okay, because now you don't need Arrieta to be a $75 million pitcher for the next 3 years.
I would agree with you, Scott, too. And like the one thing is, of course, he's tried a $30 million contract. People are going to say he wasn't worth $30 million, and of course, he has not pitched to the level of a $30 million contract. But part of the reason why the Phillies were able to give him probably way more money than he was worth is because they're not paying anybody else anything, So,
exactly.
And my question was really, look, I get it. He's not a $30 million pitcher, but who else in this system that would have pitched every 5th day would have given them 10 wins? And quite frankly, like last night, he didn't pitch great, but he probably should have got the win in that game last night. So that's 11. There's a couple other games that you can remember that the bullpen blew for them. He could have been around 13, 14, 15 wins for this team. And you're like, who else
to say nothing of the fact that he's a ground ball pitcher who pitches on a team that can't catch.
That too.
So, I mean, if their defense was better than it is, he probably has an even better record. So, and, obviously he's expressed his opinion on the shift and all that. So, we know how frustrated he was with it, and he should be. So, look, I think Arrieta, I don't think Arrieta is the problem here at all, but I don't think he was ever going to give you
$30 million value.
Yeah, exactly.
A text message brought up an interesting point here that I want to read to you, Scott. He said that the Phillies early in the year were the best team seeing pitches, drawing walks. They were very patient. The League of Pitchers has adjusted and just started pounding the strike zone, realizing this team just can't hit. Because we did see them give really good quality at bats early in the year, and they were grinding and they were in the race. It seems that as the league has adjusted to them, they have not adjusted.
No, I agree with that. And look, they're something like 5th or 6th in the league in walks, I think. And at one point they were, I think, leading the league in walks. They are up there, if not leading the league right now. They are 1 or 2 in pitches per plate appearance. All of these things are great, but at the end of these at-bats, you got to get some more hits than they've gotten. They're like 12th or 13th in the league in hits. So, you can talk all you want about grinding down pitchers and working long at-bats and on-base percentage and up and down the lineup. You're talking about a lot of hitters whose on-base percentage is close to, or if not more than, 100 points higher than their batting average. That's all well and good, but at the end of the day, the name of the game is still about getting hits and scoring runs, and they just don't do enough of that. So you're right. I think, look, the way to combat a team that sees a ton of pitches and draws a lot of walks is to pound the strike zone, make them swing, and more likely, they're going to swing and miss because they're not very good at putting the bat on the ball. And I think that that's really kind of where the loophole was for this offense. I value long at bats and grinding down pitchers as much as anyone else, but I wonder too. There are a lot of teams that have that was their philosophy for years and years and years, and now it's not so much anymore, because why do you want to grind down a 3rd or 4th starter in someone's rotation when everybody else in their bullpen throws 96, 97 the way everybody does these days? So, I do think that they're going to have to take a look at their offensive approach in the offseason and figure out, did it work? Did it work enough? It didn't work enough. And what do they have to do to make it more successful?
Scott Lauber covers the Phillies. They'll finish off Tonight, no, actually off day today. They'll start that series with the Mets. No, today's Wednesday. I keep thinking today's Thursday for some reason. Man, they'll finish off with the because they played 2 yesterday. That's what kept me up till 11:30 last night for no reason. But finish with the Nationals, off day tomorrow, and then the Mets over the weekend. And really, Scott, Mets and Marlins, they have really affected this division race because the Phillies haven't beat them, the Braves have, and you can look right there as to why the Phillies are kind of staring back 6.5 games at the Atlanta Braves. Scott Lauber, Philly.com, the Inquirer here on the Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. He appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. Thanks, Scotty.
Anytime, guys.
Yeah, great to catch up with him.